Hi, I'm Instructor Mike Gilsinger. This is Instructor Ray Bishop. Together, we're going to do the NETS air brake check for you.
I'm going to set out the chock blocks, secure the vehicle. I'm going to place one in front of the drive wheel and one behind the drive wheel. Now that we're secure, we're going to get inside the cab and begin our brake test. I'm going to use 3 points of contact to enter the vehicle. 2 hands, 1 foot, climbing like a ladder into the driver's seat. Now that we're in the cab, we're going to safe start the vehicle. We're going to make sure the transmission's in neutral. Turn the key to on position. We have to wait for the gauges to cycle and do their self-test. And fully disengage the clutch. And now I'm ready to start it. We have both ABS lights are on. The ABS lights are now going off. And I have sufficient oil pressure, 40 psi of oil pressure. I'm now going to reset the system by releasing the brakes. I want my gauges to go down to at least 99 so the governor will kick in, so we can recharge the system fully with air to prepare for our leak test. And I'll let you know when I have a full tank of air. Should be around 110 to 120 when I have a full tank. And you should hear the air release. Okay, I've got about 100. Gauges are steadily rising. We now have a full tank of air. Got to reduce the RPMs, reset the brakes. Got to make sure I put it in the lowest forward gear. Shut it off. And I need the key on. So I have power to the gauges. The first test I'm going to do is the 3 psi leak check. Once my gauges settle, I'll begin the test. I'm starting with about 110 psi. I'm going to release the brakes. The initial loss should be no more than 5 to 15 psi. I'll let the gauges settle. I lost about 10 psi. I'm now going to begin timing for a full minute, and I should lose no more than 3 psi in 1 minute. For time's sake, I'm just going to abbreviate the minute. I have lost no more than 3 psi in the 1 minute. The next test is the 4 psi leak check. I'm going to apply the service brakes with a firm, steady pressure. Again, the initial loss should be between 5 and 15 psi. I only lost 5 psi. I'll begin timing for a full minute. We'll simulate that the full minute has gone by. I've only lost 1 psi. The next test is the low air warning. I should get a buzzer and lights on both gauges. I'm going to fan the brakes down to reduce the air pressure. Should come on at about 60 psi. I'm getting close, so I'm going to slow down. There we go. I now have about 62 psi, and the low air warning light and buzzer are working properly. I'm now going to continue to fan the brakes down between 45 down to 20, at which time the spring brake should activate and both buttons will pop out. I'll fan down now. I'm going to watch both valves to make sure both the yellow and the red button pop out between 45 and 20, indicating that the spring brakes are working properly. I want to make sure they both pop, and both did pop out at 25 psi. The system is working properly. The main reason that I was watching both of the valves is sometimes one will pop out before the other. And now I'm going to rebuild my air pressure. I'm going to safe start the vehicle, put it back in neutral, put the clutch in, start it, slowly release the clutch so I'm in neutral, and bring my RPMs up between 12 and 1400 RPMs. I'm recharging the system. In Massachusetts, as I'm rebuilding air pressure, I'm going to time between 85 and 100. It should take no longer than 45 seconds. It's at 85 now. I'm going to begin timing. I'm at 90. Bringing my RPMs up at 95, 100. In 15 seconds to recover from 85 to 100. I will continue until I have full tanks of air at approximately 120 psi. I just heard the air release, the needle stopped moving. I have full tank air at 120 psi. I am now going to secure the vehicle in the lowest forward gear, that being first gear. I'm going to turn the engine off. And now I'm going to leave the vehicle. I have to remove the chock blocks to do the last 3 brake tests in Connecticut, and it'll be 4 brake tests in Massachusetts. Use 3 points of contact to exit the vehicle, as I did when I entered. I want to make sure I shut the door, and I'm going to remove the chock blocks at this point. Sometimes they stick, just give them a little kick, and we're good to go. Now we're going to begin our tug test. We're going to be checking the trailer spring brakes and the trailer coupling. We'll also check the tractor's spring brakes, make sure they're holding. In Massachusetts, we're going to do the trolley brake test, make sure that's working properly. And then at the end, for both Connecticut and Mass, we'll be checking the service brakes. And I'm going to insert the key. Always fully disengage the clutch, put it in neutral for safe starting. Key in the on position. My gauge do have to cycle to do their self-test before I start it. And we're ready to go. I am in neutral. I always like to release the clutch slowly just in case it's not in neutral for safety. Now the first test we're going to do is I'm going to release the tractor's parking brake to check the spring brakes on the trailer and also its coupling, which is very important. To do that, I'm going to disengage my clutch, put it in the lowest forward gear. I'm going to release my parking brake, and I do not want to touch the service brake at this time, otherwise I will be compounding the brakes because I still have the trailer brake set. I want to make sure both hands are on the wheel. I like to watch the tachometer so I can see when the engine starts to drag down. There we go. We got a nice tug on the trailer. It's secure, and also the 5th wheel coupling is holding. Next, I'm going to reapply the tractor parking brake. I'm going to release the trailer brake. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to release the clutch slowly, put a little drag on the engine. There we go. The tractor brakes are holding and secure. I'm going to reset the trailer brakes. In Massachusetts, I need to reset the system to full tanks of air. So this way I can do the last 2 tests. Connecticut, you're going to do the service brake test, and we'll be doing that in a few minutes. I am now ready to do my trolley brake test. I need to be in the lowest forward gear, release both brakes. Now I want to apply the service brakes because I don't want the vehicle to roll back. I'm going to release the clutch to the friction point. This is our trolley brake. I'm going to roll forward about 5 miles an hour. I want to get it going. Clutch in. Trolley brake. Trolley brake is holding normally. It's working properly. I'm going to release and hold my foot on the brake. I need a little bit of room, so I'm going to back up again. I always like to give a nice toot on the horn, put my 4-way flashers on. Make sure nobody's back there. Okay, that gives us sufficient room. Clutch in and stop. Turn my 4-ways off. Back in the lowest forward gear. Now I'm going to check my service brake. What I want to do is keep my hands loose on the wheel to feel if there's any pulling left or right, which would indicate brakes being out of adjustment. Get going about 5 miles an hour. Clutch in. Firm on the service brakes. They're working properly. There was no pulling to left or right. It means the brakes are working properly. And that concludes our brake test. I'm going to reset the brakes. Take my foot off the brake pedal. So don't compound. And this would conclude our brake test. Next, we'll be starting our in-cab inspection. I'm going to just shut the engine off for now. Now we're going to begin our in-cab inspection. I'm going to start on the top here. I want to make sure that I have a current registration and insurance card to be in this pack, and I do. Also, very important, I want to make sure I have spare bulbs and fuses. Those will always be located up top here. Now I'm going to check my glass. Normally I would roll up my window while I'm testing to make sure the driver's glass is clean, not cracked, side, and also the windshield that's clean and not cracked. In Massachusetts, I'll be looking for a valid mass inspection sticker. Passenger window is clean, it's not cracked. I want to observe both of my mirrors. They're clean, not cracked, and they are properly adjusted to me. Next, I'm going to start checking all my indicator lights. I want to have the key in the on position to make sure I can have power. I'm going to turn on the dash lights. Dash lights are working properly. I'm going to check the left directional signal indicator's working. The right indicator light is working. Four-way indicator lights are working. The wipers are working, both high and low. I push in, I have sufficient washer fluid. I have defroster. I want to make sure that that's working so I can defrost my window if it's cold or icy. Working. I'm not going to start the vehicle and check all my gauges. Again, I want to make sure I'm in neutral, safe start the vehicle. Notice I do have oil pressure again. Always very important that between 20 and 60 is normal. I'm at 40 right now. The water temperature normally runs between 180 and 200. It's at 140 and it is steadily rising because the engine is cold at this time. The tachometer is reading RPMs. I did check my speedometer when I did my rolling brake test. I have a full tank of fuel, so plenty to complete this test. Normal battery voltage should be reading between 12 and 14, and it's right at 14. I do have 2 full tanks of air, and the gauges are working properly. Also, I want to mention that my city horn and highway horn are both working properly. The steering wheel has no more than 2 inches of play. Also, the clutch has no more than 2 inches of play. And I'm going to now dry shift the transmission to make sure I can get through all the gears. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, back to neutral. No need to go to the high range because they're the same gears, just in a higher range. My emergency equipment, I do want to check my seat belt. It's not cut or frayed in any way. I want to make sure it latches properly. I may ask the inspector if they want to fasten theirs to make sure it's latching properly before we go out on the road. I have a fully charged and securely mounted fire extinguisher. It's a class BC, which is for normal use. I need at least a 10 BC if I had hazmat. Also, I have 3 reflective triangles, 1, 2, 3 in the box here, and it's securely mounted. The floor is clean, there's no debris to interfere with the controls. And this will complete my in-cab inspection.